this is Mohal Joshi from Los Angeles, California. I follow Indian foreign policy and defense with a special focus on Asia. You can follow me on Twitter at Mohal Joshi.
Hey, this is Kishor from Bengaluru in India. I am an international relations expert specializing in global security, conflict resolution, and international negotiation. My focus areas include peace building and digital diplomacy. You can find me on Twitter at Veggie Diplomat. Hello and welcome to episode 52 of India Rising, Strategic Affairs Conversations with Mohal and Kishor, a show in which we analyze the happenings from around the world and their impact on India. This time, of course, we are going to talk about the war between the United States and Israel on one side and Iran on the other. Well, we all know that Israel and Iran had been at loggerheads for more than a couple of years, especially since the October 7 attack by Hamas on Israel. But then we also know that Iran had been a perpetrator of terror in the entire region, specifically directed against Israel in particular. Now, Israel had been adopting a mowing the grass approach against Hamas and Hezbollah until October 7th of 2023. Now, people would argue that that was a flawed approach, but Israel was more content to just ensure that Hamas and Hezbollah would not grow beyond a certain size or certain capability to challenge them. Now, what happened during and after October 7 is that Iran had to be responded to by Israel, and Israel then decided to not only eliminate Hamas, but also eliminate Hezbollah, and then go for the jugular in terms of attacking the capabilities within Iran. We all know about the 12-day war in May-June of 2025, and after that, Iran increased its defense budget, with some estimates suggesting that it comprised approximately 21 to 25% of the total national government budget. It was obviously driven by rising regional tensions. Now, on the weekend of February 28 and March 1, mind you, we are recording on early Saturday morning here in India on the 21st of March and late Friday evening in the US. The weekend surprise attack on February 28 and March 1 kind of targeted the top leadership of Iran directly, and this was what everybody now calls as a decapitation strategy, where you go for the jugular, eliminate the top leadership in one go, and ensure that there would be an immediate leadership vacuum that is created in the adversary camp. Now, the attackers knew when and where the regime's senior officials would be meeting in Tehran that day, and precision munitions directed by spectacular intelligence helped them in achieving what we now know as the decapitation strategy. Not to anybody's surprise, but Marco Rubio's statement a couple of days later kind of ironed out any doubts that anybody had, and I'm going to quote him here. If Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond against the United States. If we stood and waited for that attack to come first, before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. Now, obviously, this meant that the United States had to fall in line with Israel and ensure that both of them had the surprise element in their attacks. Now, also, Mohal, we need to remember, and we need to remind our viewers as well, that the trend of formal declaration of war has kind of come down totally. The Ukraine offensive by Russia is also, they've never called it a war. It's more like a special operation which has gone on for 7 years now, 6, 7 years. Now, we all know that Iran is now at its weakest point in the past 47 years. Repeated conflict with Israel have definitely weakened Iran. Mohal, you wanted to add something there?
Yeah, so I think there is the context of why now, of like why Israel did this action in US. So as you had rightly said, this is I think the continuation of the revenge by Israel after October 7th. They are surrounded by proxies of Iran on all sides. Like they have Hamas in Gaza and to an extent in the West Bank, but mostly Gaza. They have Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon. There were some remnants of Hezbollah also in Syria under the old Assad regime. But now they pretty much battered uh, the Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They have taken quite significant action and killed most of the Hezbollah leadership, including those spectacular pager attacks. I
Right.
believe in 2024 or 2025, the date escapes me. And then also in Syria, Assad is no longer in power. Now it's a Sunni faction which controls the levers of power. So like Hezbollah has lost influence there. So this was the last of the the big actors. I mean, after taking down all the proxies, this was what Israel wanted. Now, even looking from the US angle, US knows that Iran has not been a good actor. I mean, right from the 1979 Iranian Revolution, where the Iranians stormed the embassy, and like embassy is supposed to be like a sovereign soil of the other country, so you're never supposed to invade and have at least some diplomatic immunity. However, after that, even in the 80s there have been the bombings of the in like Lebanon, where I think 240 US servicemen were killed. And also during the Iraq war, a lot of the IED deaths, the improvised explosive deaths that were planted on roadside to get US soldiers, were also attributed to Iran. So Iran has been a bad actor, no doubt. Even for the US, I mean, in Iran, famously, they do chant every week like "death to Israel" and "death to America," and they also refer to US and Israel as the great Satan and the little Satan. So we have to also look at the context that Iran was no friend of uh, the US or Israel at any. And I mean, and Israel I think has a stated policy of wiping out Israel from the
Right.
map.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of antagonism, and I think uh, in the calculation of Trump, I know like a lot of people say it's about the oil, but I don't think it's about the oil in my opinion. I mean, US imports like maybe even 2% or 500,000 barrels from the Middle East. Most of the oil is locally produced. Actually, many people will be surprised to know that US is the largest oil producer in the world. Obviously, they still need to import because the demand far outstrips the production capacity. So it's not about the oil this time around. It's more about, I would say, taking down all the anti-US faction. Like they taken down Venezuela, and Iran was next on the list. I think there had been any not any wars in the uh, past, let's say 20-30 years, barring the Gulf War of 91. So a lot of actors, I think the US perceives them to be slowly drifting away from the US sphere of influence to the Chinese and the Russian sphere of influence. I think this is trying to, I mean, in their words, set them straight, for a lack of better term. And they want to be the dominant. And like, as you know, like Donald Trump's personality, he likes to dominate and he wants to be the number one superpower in the world. So I mean, as referring to, as some people, the doctrine, like coming from the Monroe Doctrine, they want to control and make sure that everybody falls in line, and their diktat is like followed everywhere. So this is more of even US saw an opportunity. I think the repeated wars within Iran and Israel, first in 2024, where they exchanged some missile salvos, and followed with the 12-day war last year. I think they see the Iran is at the weakest in the past 47 years, and I think Donald Trump being more of a gambler than past US presidents, even though with a lot of risk associated with this war. I mean, mind you, see, Iran is not a Venezuela where it can be toppled by just like one push or shove. I mean, it has, like, I think as per the power index, like it's one of the top 20 militaries, if not a top 10 military in the world. It is surely a top 20 military, so it won't be easy to topple over like a country of 90 million. But like Trump did take the chance. I mean, only history will tell whether they'll get bogged down and be like another Vietnam or Afghanistan, or will they have a like some kind of spectacular victory. But this is what the calculus was, that try to hit Iran when they're at its weakest, and try to get them to agree to some sort of compromise where the regime is not as much anti-US, anti-Israel. Plus, obviously, they wanted to get rid of the ballistic missile program, which is a continuous threat to the region, and also denuclearize Iran if possible. Kishore?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely wonderful context that you provided here. I think also what is important is how Iran responded during the initial wave of attack coming in from Israel and US, and also now after a couple of weeks. So initially, Iran went all in, uh, trying to overwhelm the air defense system of both Israel and the United States. And then once they got to know the location of their launchers and all the other systems that they had, the infrastructure that they had, Iran now is taking it easy, trying to attack only when it needs to, and ensuring that its uh, drones and missiles have a higher success rate in terms of their attack capabilities. So the Iranian response has definitely surprised one and all. Use of low-cost drones, as I mentioned, to inflict heavier cost on the adversary has kind of forced everybody to take note of. So I think that's something that both Trump in particular and the United States in general possibly did not take into account. And this is also one of the reasons why the war seems to be dragging more than what people anticipated. So I think that's one key. Mohal, I'll let you elaborate more on that. But also additionally, to the point that you were just mentioning about the Iranian military being definitely not a pushover. One key aspect is not only do they have a strong military, but also politically their political structure is also quite well structured. I mean, they have a good amount of decentralization that is already built into their uh, political system, and therefore that ensures that the Iranian regime's continuity is not hindered in any manner or any way at all. So I think that's also key, because right now we've had multiple waves of decapitation attacks happening by both the United States and Israel, and almost every couple of days we see news coming in of the top layer being eliminated. But somehow Iran continues to put people into the right place at the top leadership, and that's key, or that kind of underlines the essence of decentralization that they had achieved. Mohal, you want to talk about how Iran's approach of asymmetric warfare has panned out in the past 3 weeks?
Yeah. So let me just complete your point on the decentralization. So I think Iran had foreseen this exact situation, especially after the 12-day war, and there were reports that the supreme leader Khamenei had put in place a chain of succession. I mean, even as you see like on the day one, where around 40 leaders were killed along with the supreme leader, they didn't have any disruption of the response from the Iranian side. So they had planned it, and even like by now, I would say at least 50 of their top leaders, if not more, have been assassinated. But still, the IRGC uh, keeps churning out, like, uh, response after response to the US and Israeli strike. So that shows that they had a lot of planning. I mean, also, it's been reported in the news that both Israel and Iran, both for 40 years, have been planning this all out war with each other. And they both had made quite significant plans on how to deal with each other. Obviously, the Gulf angle is kind of new and unexpected, but both sides had planned quite well for this war. And the decentralization shows, I mean, it also creates a new question that even if tomorrow US can exert enough pressure, who do they really talk to in Iran? Because if all the top leadership is eliminated, and if what if the new supreme leader, like Mojtaba Khamenei, who is the son of the supreme leader, he's supposed to be like more, let's say, radicalized, then it creates an issue that you might have to talk to somebody who might be less inclined and maybe wants to fight to the finish.
Yeah.
Anyways, so coming to the asymmetric warfare, so now Iran knew that it could not match up with the US and Israel in pure military power and hardware. So what they have done is they have developed a vast variety of ballistic missiles, both liquid and solid fuel missiles. They have all range of short range, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles. Now, Kishore, I mean, we did cover, I mean, this might seem ages ago, like the after the assassination of Qasim Soleimani, like in Jan 22, and this is way before this is before, just before the pandemic. So it might seem like a million years ago for many people. But in response, at that time, once he was assassinated, uh, the Iranians, they fired a bunch of ballistic missiles at the US bases in Iraq,
Yeah.
and there were a lot of injuries to army. Luckily, nobody died. Otherwise, it would have escalated back then in 2020 when Trump was in its first term. But there were a lot of traumatic brain injuries and concussions reported, and a lot of the soldiers had afterlying effects for years to come. I don't know if this has been very well reported. And I think, anyways, after that, the pandemic took over the whole news cycle. But my whole point being that they had very accurate short range and medium range ballistic missiles. So what they did in the initial stages, now it's being reported, is they just launched out whatever they had. Now they knew that eventually they would get decimated in the long run. So this is like the classical nuclear scenario, like, when you have the first strike, like, use it or lose it, because if you wait for the first strike to open your weapons, it might all have been destroyed. So in the use it or lose it scenario, they just plan to have a massive salvo, and I think they launched like around 1,000 drones and missiles on the first day. Now you can see, like, from the pictures online, that it did hit some of the radar installations in Bahrain, also the THAAD, which is the terminal high altitude defense radar in places like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. Some of these have been destroyed. So it uh, creates issues with long-term ballistic missile detection. So smartly they targeted all these radar and the sensor arrays, or the sensor net of the US, that when they launch the missiles in the future or in the later part of the conflict, they will be harder to intercept and shoot down. So that was the missile was one part. Another part is the drones. Now we have seen in the Ukraine war, in Russia and Ukraine, that there have been an extensive use of drones. I think drones has changed the like how the battles
Yeah, the
evolve
landscape
and
of
shape.
the landscape of
Yeah,
warfare has
yeah.
changed
I mean,
completely.
I would say like drones will do everything in the future, but like they are a nuisance factor for sure if not
Yeah.
taken care of. I mean, we can see even like as far back as 2000, I believe 18 or 19, when the Houthis they launched. I mean, obviously this was provided by the Iranians, they launched drone attacks on Saudi oil facilities. So these things have been going on for a long time, but they have received prominence more recently. So they launched the Shahid 136 drones, which is basically like a moped motor on back of a delta wing drone, which carries, I believe, like if I'm not wrong, like a 50 kg warhead or something. And they have been like used to target a lot of the facilities in the US bases and the the US facilities all across the Gulf in Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE, and of course Israel. Another interesting thing was that they not only targeted the military facilities, but they also targeted like hotels, entertainment centers, and all kinds of, even the Dubai airport was targeted, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait airport was targeted. So interestingly, they also targeted mass transit venues to which kind of like also is interesting that these nations have been like blindsided by these attacks. That, I mean, to be fair, the Iranians did warn the Gulf countries that if a war breaks out, nobody's safe. But I would think that these guys would have thought that there would be attacks on the US bases hosted by them, but not on their commercial interests. And what has ended up happening is that these countries were not that prepared for such a ballistic missile and drone attack, and they have gotten swamped with these attacks left and right, and they had to bear the brunt of Iran's fury. Especially, I mean, if you look at Dubai, I mean, it has seen like I think almost UAE would have seen almost as many attacks as Israel, which is kind of interesting that UAE was kind of friendly. I mean, mind you, UAE, in part of the sanctions of the last 10-15 years, they have helped Iranians with their banking and finances and allowing transport of goods and stuff. They have kind of helped with the shadow banking of the Iranians. And I think they would have been pretty upset that just being friends with the Iranians and helping them out financially didn't protect them from the Iranian attack. So Iran is just pursuing this madman strategy where they're just hitting out everywhere, so that everybody in the Gulf who is hit will put pressure on the US and Israel to de-escalate. So, and I mean, the Iranians being a Shia power and everybody else being Sunni, there has been a kind of cold war going on in the Gulf for years on end. I mean, the Houthis have been fighting the Saudis, and the Houthis are supported by the Iranians, and the Saudis are supporting the Yemeni government. So there has been this proxy wars, but none to this level where actual cities and commercial interests, ports, hubs, oil facilities, they have been hit. I mean, in just the other day, after the gas facility in southern Iran was hit, uh, the Iranians hit the oil facilities and the natural gas facilities in uh, Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. I mean, interestingly, Qatar, which is one of the largest producers of natural gas, one of its refineries said that 17% of the production is cut for like at least 3 to 5 years. So some of these uh, attacks have long tail of consequences, and it's not just like everything will go back to normal. Now, speaking of natural gas and oil, also the Iranians have been attacking all the shipping going through the Strait of Hormuz. So the Strait of Hormuz, for the reader's reference, is a narrow strait that connects the Persian Gulf to the west and the Gulf of Oman to the east, and all the oil and natural gas which comes from Iraq, Iran, UAE, Saudi Arabia, they has to flow through this narrow channel, which I think is like around 30 miles at its narrowest. So I think the 20% of the world's oil flows through this narrow channel. So they have been randomly hitting like tankers and shipping whichever flowing through the Gulf. So now all the ships, at the fear of being attacked, they have like stop movement. I mean, obviously there was an issue of war insurance has to be, new rates for war insurance to be renegotiated. But even if the new insurance, I mean, what I heard from some shipping expert was that the insurance used to be like around 0.15% of their total goods value of their goods, which is now like 1.5 to even 5%. So it's like 100x more expensive. So now they have to not only take the personal risk of not dying from an attack, but also pay like 100x more for their insurance. And there have been reports that some ships have been allowed to move, and there are rumors, obviously nothing has been confirmed, that there have been some secret back channel payments to the Iranians to let these tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, this has caused like a lot of issues elsewhere. And I think, Kishore, I'm sure you will like cover this later in the podcast. But uh, but the economic pressure that has caused severe disruption not only in the Gulf but everywhere in the world. uh, the US is trying to, the Donald Trump did make a appeal to nations to help him with the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, but nobody wants to get involved in this war for now, and everybody wants a hands-off approach. So it will be interesting to see like how what to do. Like even if the war ends tomorrow, just like the Houthis who randomly attack shipping in the Red Sea, another choke point, by the way, could continue to attack the shipping or continue to charge a tariff for the shipping that's moving. So the how for the US to ensure that there is a free movement of shipping will be something we'll have to take a look. Kishore?
Uh, Great point, Mohal. I mean, especially the impact or the hit on the crude oil shipping and possible long-term ramification on the supply chain chaos. I think that is something that will be felt across the region, both South Asia and eastern part of Asia, China, Japan, and Southeast Asia. And I think that's where the key is. And obviously, we have been seeing how Trump is keen on getting these countries who are directly impacted by the closure to come and guard Strait of Hormuz, not letting Iran take control, A, and B, kind of pass on the cost of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. So he wants countries like India, Japan, then of course Europe as well to come and take part in this war by keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. So yeah, I mean, great point, Mohal. What we'll also do is we'll kind of focus directly on the India approach and how we will how what we have seen domestically within and outside among the Indian diaspora, and that's what we're going to talk now. Yeah, so in terms of the impact on India and Indians in the region, I think the well-being of over 1 crore Indians, 90 lakhs to 1 crore Indians in the Gulf countries, that seems to be emerging as the top priority for the government in New Delhi. We saw, Mohal, this is what happened initially, that India did not condemn or condole the death of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. What also happened was that India or Indian leadership, Modi in particular, went about talking with leaders of various countries in the region, like Bahrain, like UAE, and he kept talking about how these countries were being attacked and these countries were being impacted, and civilian infrastructure, public infrastructure was being attacked, and people there were also getting killed, and how India was condemning all those attacks of attacks on civilians. So I think this raised a question initially, but the government of India was quick to point out that even when Colonel Muammar Gaddafi of Libya was killed, the government in New Delhi, the Congress government, the UPA government in New Delhi did not condone or express uh, any displeasure on the manner in which he was eliminated. So I think India or the current government mentioned that this was just the same process that was being followed. Now, in terms
Yeah, and
of
even I think the one, sorry to interrupt, but one thing was that though there was no condolences at the passing of the assassination of the supreme leader, I think eventually the foreign secretary did go to a condolence meet that was held by the Iranian embassy in New
yes,
Delhi. So they did take that step, but a lot of the critics were up in arms about the initial lack of condolences. But as you said, I think there are like 9 million Indians living in the Gulf, and also like 100 billion in um, uh, remittances that come back from the Gulf every year, as per reports. So that would be of the prime importance, versus like trying to balance out all sides. I mean, also as like I think yesterday, Congress member of Parliament Shashi Tharoor said that if there's a larger war, and if a lot of the people in the Gulf lose employment and they all come back to India, it would be another issue where finding employment in India, which is already a challenge, would be more burdensome, given like so many NRIs come back to India from the Gulf,
right.
Kishore.
Loss of employment, loss of foreign exchange coming into India. I think that will be a bigger
Mm-hmm.
headache for the government in New Delhi. You're absolutely right. Also, from what we hear and from what we read, I think the Indian government is also trying to persuade the governments in the region, in Bahrain, in Qatar, in UAE, that the safety and well-being of Indians in general who are working in those countries to be of top priority. So I think that way Indian government is trying to ensure that they harm does not come their way. So I think that's the initial approach that has been the stand of the Indian government. But more importantly, domestically as well, we've had a LPG crisis brewing. Commercial cylinders for commercial establishments like restaurants, hotels, and other commercial entities. The supply of that has kind of come down. The cost has gone up as well. An LPG cylinder, which was around 1400, has now risen up to around 2200, 2300. But in black market, it is now running at around 3,500 as well. So definitely problems there for commercial usage of liquefied petroleum gas. But additionally, I think India has been trying to do what it can in terms of getting ships out of Strait of Hormuz. Even the other day, we saw three ships coming in, passing through Strait of Hormuz and docking in Indian ports, one in Mangalore, one in Gujarat, and I don't know where the other one was. I think it was in Mumbai. So I think we are getting tiny amounts of LPG loaded onto Indian ports. That is certainly not enough. Certainly not up to the mark in terms of supply chain being restored, but at least we are ensuring that that Iran is listening to our needs, is listening to what we want, and ensuring that our ships pass through the troubled Strait of Hormuz region. Now, however, I think what is more important to realize is that the question of petrol and diesel prices might, and I think it will definitely increase in India, possibly immediately after this round of assembly elections that we have
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
in West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Puducherry, and Assam. All these states are quite important for the BJP as well. I mean, mind you, we also have the budget session of the parliament going on right now up until the first week of April. So I think the petrol and diesel prices will definitely take a hit. And there might even be some amount of austerity measures that might come in if the war continues longer and if the supply chain continues to be disrupted any longer. Uh, in the neighborhood, though, we have seen Sri Lanka already declaring Wednesday as an additional public holiday in addition to the weekends to reduce fuel consumption. The government offices will be closed except for emergency response departments. But overall, I think we are seeing the strain on our neighboring countries. Most of us are dependent on Strait of Hormuz for our immediate LPG and petrol and diesel consumption needs. Mohal, the other thing I wanted to talk about was how Sri Lanka was caught in all this. I mean, we had a naval meet in Visakhapatnam here in India, where this was before the war, prior to the war starting, and we had a couple or three ships coming from Iran, docking in Visakhapatnam, participating in the naval exercises, and then on their way back, they realized that the war had started back home, and a couple of ships they tried. They were still in close to Sri Lankan waters. They tried to dock in the Sri Lankan ports. One of them was closer to Indian waters. It had already crossed the Sri Lankan the island and was on the home stretch. And they asked for permission from India, and Indians agreed. So that ship kind of docked in Kochi, but unfortunately, the other ship, which was still closer to Sri Lankan waters, was not given permission to enter these waters, nor were they given permission to dock in the Sri Lankan Colombo port. So, US apparently took out this ship, the name being Iris Dana, and the crew or the staff in that ship had to raise an alarm, and then Sri Lankan Army, Sri Lankan Navy, they had to go rescue the people in the sinking ship. And although there were quite a few casualties around 2027, the remainder of the crew were airlifted, and they were taken into Sri Lankan territory. Mohal, that had been an unforeseen consequence of the war extending its influence far beyond the Middle East or the Gulf or the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, I mean,
And
in
we've seen
combat
that coming
such.
all the way up to Sri Lanka now.
Yeah. I mean, and as we record today on the evening of 20th and early morning in India on the 21st, we also hearing reports that Iranians tried to launch ballistic missiles at the Diego Garcia port in the Indian Ocean.
Right.
So, it the war has gone to like as far wide as Israel and Cyprus to the east, Azerbaijan to the north, and let's say Sri Lanka and like now Diego Garcia to the south. So it has covered a huge geographical area, no doubt. I mean, there's also a lot of criticism about India, but I'm not sure Indians could have done anything about, even if they knew about the presence. I mean, there are some ludicrous suggestions online that US should have notified India before sinking the ship, which is, I mean, quite unrealistic to tell a third nation when you're sinking a ship, like, what if the information leaks? I mean, it just like boggles the mind that why would you even want to suggest some stuff. But nonetheless, I mean, once war is declared, I mean, once you're in international waters, which is more than 12 nautical miles of the coast of any country, you're in international waters and everything is fair game, even though it might be one single ship and might not have done much to change the course of the war, especially since most of the Iranian navy is at the bottom of the Persian Gulf right now. um, War is war, unfortunately, and I mean the submarine, uh, the US SSN, or the nuclear sub, did sink Iris Dana.
Yeah, I mean
Sure.
the additional aspect there. One ship asked for a refuge in India. The other
Yeah.
two asked Colombo. They did not ask New Delhi. I mean, there is
Mm-hmm.
nothing else that India could have done. I mean, they could not have told Colombo, or they could not have told these ships to come over to Kochi, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, yeah.
whatever help they asked for, they got it from India. But the other
Mm-hmm.
two ships, I think they were plain unlucky.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the other factors about this escalation ladder, I think in terms of Venezuela, or even in the India-Pakistan Operation Hindu that we saw last year,
Mm-hmm.
India had upper hand in the escalation matrix. Even in
Mm-hmm.
the Venezuela conflict, or the Venezuela
Mm-hmm.
hijack of the president, US clearly had control of the escalation matrix, and there was
Mm-hmm.
nothing else that Venezuela could have done. Out here, we are seeing that uh, Iran, time and again, has been poking holes in the escalation matrix that US and Israel are
Yeah,
having.
exactly. Yeah.
And therefore, just like how you pointed out earlier, the asymmetric warfare that Iran is bringing into the entire region, you can call it asymmetric warfare, you can call it horizontal escalation, you can call it whatever you want. But I think that is definitely what Iran has been up to, ensuring that they continue to second guess both Israel and the United States. So, additionally, there has been talk about how this entire conflict, this entire war, has been a weekend operation. Every weekend we have one or the other major escalation.
Mm-hmm.
And this time around, as we record now, we are seeing Iran take the initiative during the weekend and attacking directly Diego Garcia base of
Mm-hmm.
the United States. So I think that way Iran continues to surprise most watchers of how the conflict is panning out, and we are pretty sure that this conflict seems to be now turning into a long drawn out conflict, just like
Mm-hmm.
how may not be as long as the Ukraine Russia special operation, but definitely not a short one ending in a couple of weeks or a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
Mohal,
Mm-hmm.
you want to talk about how Israel has been working on their air defense, and also kind of extrapolate it onto the Indian scenario, and talk about how we would want to bolster our own air defenses.
Yeah, so one of the things, I mean, no doubt there was an expectation that Israel would, sorry, not Israel, I beg your pardon, Iran would hit back at the Gulf countries. I think many of the Gulf emissaries were in DC multiple times in the weeks before the war, pleading with the Trump administration to not go with war because Iran had threatened to engulf the whole Gulf in the flames of war, like supposedly. One thing which has surprised is the drone warfare across against the Gulf. Now, one thing which many defense experts, especially here in the US, is kind of frustrating for them is like after the lessons learned in the drone wars between Ukraine and Russia, US was not uh, more prepared for the drone swarm. Not, I wouldn't say drone swarms, but like the drones being sent over by the Iranians. So that thing, I mean, they did expect a barrage of missiles to come through, and they have been using, I mean, in some cases, their $1 million interceptors, and there is another, and we can do another podcast on like the running the low supply of the exquisite high end interceptors that have been used, the arrows, the THAADs, the SM2s, the SM3s, the SM6s that the US Navy and Israel have been using. But keeping for aside, the low end warfare is, I think, where they have missed a trick and not deployed more resources. Now, the US has I mean, there are reports that they have taken help of the Ukrainians to in a interesting turn of events is usually the US was helping Ukraine. Now it's the Ukrainians are helping the Gulf countries to help bolster the air defenses, especially against these drones, the Shahid drones. So I think this also brings out that that like the air defense, especially the counter UAS, or is they called it a CUAS. I think this is one term. If you're a defense uh, watcher, you will see and read everywhere. It's basically stands for counter unmanned aerial systems. So what happens is that basically many of the high-end interceptor missiles, they could be used in theory against drones, but the cost asymmetry means that in the long run you end up spending way too much money, like a $20,000 $50,000 drone. If you use a $2 million missile, it doesn't work out well. And then anyways, production of these missiles is very limited because nobody is doing a production on war footing except maybe Ukraine and Russia at the moment. So what there are several ways to counter drones. Now, we did see in Operation Sindoor that India, I mean, I know in India there's always this, like, we never throw away our junk stuff, we always repurpose it for something else. So like, to make light of a situation, like we had those old Bofors anti-aircraft guns, like which you might have seen in like a old black and white movies or World War II movies. So India had repurposed those Bofors L-70 guns to the anti-drone unit with putting some optical and radar sensors. So there should be like multiple layers where you don't have to rely on missiles, but you have like anti-aircraft guns, you have shorads, you have a tracked vehicle with a cannon, let's say a 30 millimeter cannon, where you can take down drones. There are man pads, which are basically shoulder fired missiles. And also Ukraine has been experimenting with something interesting. They have counter suicide drones. So if a suicide drone is coming in, you send another drone against it, and you either have a hit to kill, or you have a proximity fuse, and it creates a blast radius and it disables the incoming drone. So there have been this lot of this various strategies. And interestingly, one more thing I want to mention, the US also has instead of using those expensive air-to-air missiles which cost in the millions, they have something called a APKWS, which is basically they take out the rockets that are used by the helicopters for attack. They are put onto a guidance kit with an electrical optical sensor, and it's called the Advanced Precision Kill Warfare System, if I'm not wrong. It's like just cost 20,000. So if you have a 20-30,000 versus a 50,000 drone, or let's say 20 versus 20K, then you have a more meeting of the cost structure, where you can use a rocket guy with a it's like a JDAM. A JDAM is what, a dumb bomb put on a guidance kit with those fins and sensors and everything. So same concept you apply to a rocket, and you use it against launched from a fighter airplane, and you use it against a drone. So these are the various new strategies. And the lesson for India is like, while we did well against a drone, but like 99% of the drones, if the reports are to be believed, were unarmed drones. So next time, I mean, if Pakistan would take a lesson, it being the weaker adversary, they would go for this same asymmetric warfare against India. So they knew that their 12 bases were hit on May 10th. So the lesson for them is try to hit early and hard, just like the Iranians did. Like, try to hit as many, and when the balloon goes up, like in the first hours, launch as many missiles and drones as possible. And this time, don't send those dummy drones with just for reconnaissance. This would be like armed drones. So just saturate the airspace of India. So India, I know the air defense did spectacular job during Op Sindoor, but we face nowhere the amount of drones and missiles that Iran is lobbing at the Gulf countries and um Israel. I mean, and in our case, not one drone or missile did get through, which caused significant damage. But expect there would be some leakers or squirters, as they say, to get through. So India has to make sure of the more robust defense. Interestingly, the chief of army staff has introduced an Ashni platoon, which is basically a drone platoon for every battalion of the Indian army. So India is taking lessons from the past conflicts, and hopefully when the next time the conflict with Pakistan comes up, I mean, Pakistan would be tempted to fire like in quick and bulk, especially targeting, let's say, the S-400, which they tried last time also. So like the third radar which was destroyed in the US case in this war, Pakistanis will also want to blind India by uh, destroying all the major sensor radars, intelligence nodes in the initial uh, hours of the war. So this would be the main strategy, that not only account for all the Pakistani missiles, expect a more vigorous Pakistani missile attack, but also expect a drone attack. And the drones they have, do they have the challenges? I mean, they fly low, they have much smaller radar cross section, so sometimes they are not picked up by radars always, and they need to have an individual operator in the field to detect and down these, which I think the Gulf countries have especially found it hard to detect and down these with their limited resources. I think that will also be a learning curve for them to on how to detect these drones. And I'm sure next time, if let's say conflict occurs, they'll be way more prepared. I would expect the anti the CUAS, the counter unmanned aerial system sales to go through the roof for the Gulf countries
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the next few years.
I mean,
Kishore?
yeah. Also, I think to your point on Pakistan trying to use that exact strategy that Iran is employing right now. We all know that Pakistan gets its drones from Turkey
Turkey.
and
Hmm.
also a fair amount from China as well. So I think Islamabad and Rawalpindi in particular would already have their shopping bag full.
Yeah,
Uh,
and also one more thing, since you brought up China and
mhm.
Rawalpindi, so the nexus was China used to provide targeting information to Pakistan. I think this time some of the very precise hits. Obviously, the Iranians have a good industrial base, and interestingly, they have a very high percentage of college graduates, so they have a lot of technical know-how and expertise. But the point I was trying to make is they got targeting information as per reports to be believed from the Russians. So the Pakistanis will definitely get way more support from the Chinese in terms of where the Indian assets are and where to be targeted. So the Indian air defense will have to be up to its job, because the Pakistanis will definitely use Chinese surveillance and reconnaissance to target Indian assets. Kishore?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So I think, yeah, I mean, we've kind of uh, spoken elaborately on how India needs to bolster its air defense. Mohal, you want to talk about how this is playing out globally, global ramification in terms of
Yeah, I
Europe,
think.
NATO, and
Hmm.
even rogue states like North
Yeah,
Korea?
so Donald Trump has tried to get the help of the NATO states to help open the Strait of Hormuz, but I mean, many of the allies have been turned off by Trump's rhetoric on various issues such as NATO spending, and also the issue of him trying to take over Greenland, and also the tariffs, which is a point
Mm.
of contention with the rest of the world. So. Now when US needs help, like almost everybody has said no to Trump in helping. Anyways, nobody wants to get a tangle with Iran, especially the Europeans, which are in the missile range of, I mean, at least the Eastern European countries who are in the missile range of the Iranians. So nobody wants to everybody wants to just have a neutral stance for now. um, and like I think one of the lessons we can learn from this and in the Ukraine war, which started like around 4 years ago, is been like country needs to make like decisive uh, decisions. You cannot leave stuff hanging like Ukraine. Like, I mean, as we covered in like 4 years ago in our earlier episode, that they left the NATO membership hanging. I mean, it wasn't Ukraine's fault. I mean, it was also the NATO members have to agree to admit a new member.
Of course.
But I mean, either you admit it or you just give up on the idea. Like leaving this hanging leaves doubt in the adversary's mind, and then they don't know what to do. I mean, obviously, Russia has gotten into a no-win war, but they did invade Ukraine. I think same. I would compare to Iran on a different level. Now, Iran, after the war with Iraq, they had a lot of misgivings, because on one hand, on the western side, they had US presence in Iraq, and on the eastern flank, they had Afghanistan, where the US also had a presence. So they thought they were going to be next. So in 2003, the Iranians started their nuclear enrichment program on the way to producing a nuclear bomb. Now, some reports say that the supreme leader forbade the production of an actual nuclear device, while other reports dispute it. But they left the nuclear question hanging. They never said we will not create a nuclear weapon, and they will also said like we will go overtly nuclear. Now just compare that to a North Korea, right? After the US invasion of Iraq, they were scared quite a bit, and they went on the enrichment program. They withdrew from the NPT, North Korea, and they were exploded their first device, I think, by the end of 2006. So they were overtly nuclear by 2006. By 2012, I think they declared themselves to an official nuclear power state, while the Iranians left it hanging. And I mean, they did have a JCPOA, where an Obama administration gave them like a window where they, for relief for sanctions for 15 years, they would not enrich uranium. But the question always was that no non-nuclear weapons expertise requires more than 20% enrichment. Now they boasted, even in their recent talks with the US envoy Witkoff and Jared Kushner, that they have 400 kgs of enriched uranium up to 60%. Now there could only be one usage of 60% enriched uranium, which is to make a nuclear weapon. Obviously you need to enrich to 90%, which might take couple of weeks as per the reports. But the whole question is like, if you were going, then go the whole hog and cover and go overtly nuclear, or just say we are not going to go nuclear and we are open to inspections. So leaving this in between state leads you down a path where your adversaries target you, you know. So either you go like the North Korea route, go nuclear, or you go maybe like a Gaddafi route, where you give up nuclear weapons. But in the case of Gaddafi, he gave up nuclear weapons, and I mean, there was a revolution to overthrow, and he died in a ditch where they killed him like a dog, I mean, for a lack of better term. So these were the hard decisions that the top leaders, I mean, this for nations, like either you, if you want to go like a difficult route, I mean, obviously there's also the case where Iranians said dead to Iran and dead to Israel, which doesn't help you that you are going nuclear. I mean, compared to India, obviously India did face a lot of opposition from US and all the other countries, but at least India wasn't willing the complete destruction of US and Israel. And there was, mind you, tremendous amount of opposition. We have faced a lot of sanctions for going overtly nuclear, but we got there in the end. And these countries are just paying the price for not having a decisive moment either way, you know, Kishore.
Agree, totally agree. I think the
And then Kishore, you want to cover like how you think the war will uh, play out from here on a little bit?
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to your point on the rogue state trying to go one up on the P5 club and how they missed a point. I think the point is well taken. North Korea didn't listen to anybody; they just went nuclear. They are now in a much better spot. Everybody knows that if even if there is a semblance of a tiny attack on North Korea, they would definitely not hesitate in using the bombs that they have. So I think that's where things are as of now. Libya definitely missed a point, and even the other nations like Venezuela, they all definitely missed a point. Anyway, now in terms of what next, I think the escalation matrix has definitely turned upside down. Iran continues to surprise Trump and Netanyahu. There is a lot of fog of war that's coming in, so not everything that we see on internet is true and real. But more importantly, what we are seeing is Iran's determination to ensure that they hold absolute control on where this war is headed. They have made it sure, they have made it amply clear multiple times that they did not start the war, but they want to end it on their own terms.
Their terms. Yeah.
They do not want the US or Israel to dictate to them on how or when to end this war. So I think even if Trump is looking for an easy way out, that is something that is definitely not going to happen. Mind you, Trump actually wants to wind this up as early as possible and then possibly focus on Cuba, but because he has told multiple times that Cuba would be next. I mean, we are already hearing about civilian protest happening on the streets of Havana there.
Yeah.
But Iran, on its part, is definitely not going to play the role that US wants it to. So I think we will continue to see more damage being imparted on Middle Eastern countries. Iran would expect that UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, they all would go and try to convince the United States to roll down, to cut down on their rhetoric, to cut down on their attacks on petrol and on the gas fields and the oil fields, both offshore and within territory of Iran. And vice versa, I think once that is achieved, Iran would want then to cut down on their attacks on oil infrastructure in other parts of Middle East. However, I think what is more important is are Israel and the United States on the same page when it comes to the end goal or how they want this war to continue or not to continue? Because mind you, for Israel, this is once in a lifetime opportunity to
Exactly.
cut down on Iran, make sure that Iran is cut down to size, and within Israel also, for the people of Israel, they have that thirst, or they are okay with a long drawn out conflict with Iran, knowing well that if you leave it here, Iran will come back. Iran will
Yeah,
continue to
exactly. They will build
build
back
back
all
on
the
their
missiles. Yeah.
exactly, and also build back their proxies. If not Hamas and Hezbollah, maybe some other terror group. So I think people in Israel are definitely on the side of the government there, and they don't mind actually this war extending for a little longer. However, in the US, I mean, even when the war began, there was not much of support for a kinetic action being taken on Tehran, and definitely not a decapitation attack that we witnessed. But as this war progresses, as days turn into weeks, we are seeing more and more opposition coming in. I mean, just a couple of days ago, you had the DNI chief. Uh,
Vice
and
chief.
yeah, vice chief. I think his name is Kent, if I'm not
Joe
wrong.
Kent.
Joe Kent,
Yeah, he
yes.
resigned.
He resigned, telling that he would not agree with the tactics being employed here. So I think that way we are seeing far more stronger opposition voices coming in domestically in the US. So I think this would be far more detrimental for Trump, because you have the Senate elections also coming quite
Yeah, yeah.
close.
I think
So I think
that's a
that
good
way.
point. That Mhm.
So I think that way we'll have more pressure on Trump rather than on Bibi. Mohal?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the midterms are in November, and already like inflation, which was well under control, is now there could be signs of it picking up, especially dollar. I mean, gasoline or actually diesel has gone up $1, which is like quite a bit, like almost like 20% increase. So this flows down to increase in prices, even though US doesn't import much, like less than 500,000 barrels from the Gulf. The prices have gone up quite a bit, and people are paying more at the pump. And usually what I've seen is like every war the president sees a mild or a significant bump at the beginning of any war, but this president like Donald Trump's approval rating has been flat at 40%. So they have seen, so this is not a very popular war. And the issue is that this would cause uh, Republicans to lose not only the House but also the Senate in the midterm. I mean, also on the Gulf side, after being, I mean, there has been this Shia Sunni rivalry from a long time. I mean, we were close to the Abraham Accords, where all these countries would have recognized the state of Israel just before the October 7th, to 2023, and now these countries are on the opposite side, and I think they are also at there testing their patience. Even today I just read that there were 60 drones launched at Saudi Arabia, so I don't think this is escalating, and I think Iran uh, thinks that they have the upper hand because they can force the world into either higher gas prices or Trump having lesser support. They know that Israel is not going to back off because it's one in a lifetime chance, as you say, but the Gulf countries will put maybe pressure, or they will be forced to join the fight eventually, who knows. uh, so it will be like interesting to see what happens. I mean, the timeline given was 4 to 6 weeks, so we are week 3, so we are still like 3 weeks out from what they projected on day one of the fight. But what if Iran doesn't give up, like, I mean, US could enter the war but they could give up, but what if Iran still wants to keep fighting? And because they are at a existential threat to the regime, like they don't want to give up and surrender, right? Because that will cause a lot of issues in the Middle East. Kishor?
Thank you, Mohal. Yeah, I think we have covered everything that we thought we wanted to. So I think we'll wrap it up here. That, dear listener, wraps up today's episode where we spoke about the war in the Middle East. To continue hearing about such interesting topics, do subscribe to our channel India Rising wherever you are listening to us. We would also like to hear from you if you have any suggestions on any topics that you would like us to cover. Do remember that these topics should be directly related to Indian foreign policy. Until the next episode, this is Mohal and Kishor signing off.